All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much for inviting me to this stupendous Durgapur Yatra Zoom interview. I'm very grateful to have your Sangha, your association. We can reminisce on some of Srila Prabhupada's wonderful activities and also his instructions in the West and back in India, of course. So when Prabhupada started the movement, a small drop-in center in New York, in a very poor area of New York called the Bowery. At that time in America, in the West, there was this youth movement. It was called the protest movement. The young people were protesting against so many evils of Kali Yuga. Like the war, there was a war going on against communism in Vietnam, and many of the youth were being killed over there simply for some ideology of capitalism. And also in America, there was unrest because the African American people were being subjugated and oppressed. So there was also this, what is called civil rights movement. So many young people were dropping out of the American status quo. We refused to work for the corporate machine, experimenting with ganja and so many things we were doing. We were actually looking for some kind of moksha. So in San Francisco, that was the center of the youth movement, the young people's hippie movement, it was called. And there were thousands and thousands of young people living in the streets and just moving around, searching for something or other, and always trying to get high or ananda bliss through the use of drugs and so on. So Srila Prabhupada, one of his first Rath Yatras was in San Francisco. And Brahmananda Prabhu, one of his first disciples from New York, he had been to India and he was reading books on Vedas and so on. Anyway, Prabhupada ordered him to go to Japan and print the Krishna book, which is all about Krishna's life. It's the 10th canto, summary study of 10th canto. So the Japanese are very eager to print this book, the religious book from India. And they did a very wonderful job of printing this large Krishna book. It was about 11 inches by 7 inches. And there was an introduction by a very famous person from the Beatles called George Harrison. George Harrison and the Beatles were leaders of the hippie young people's movement. And they actually had been approached by devotees in England, Yamuna and Mukunda and Guru Das, Shamasundar. And the Beatles George Harrison was very serious about Krishna consciousness and about Vedic culture and the Bhagavad Gita. So the Beatles gave devotees and Srila Prabhupada all kinds of facilities in England. The devotees were living on this large, huge estate owned by the Beatles. And Srila Prabhupada was there also preaching to them about the peace formula. The Beatles were singing songs about peace and happiness because there's no peace and happiness without Krishna. So when these books were published, Brahmananda brought 1 carton of Krishna book to show Prabhupada in San Francisco Rath Yatra. There were thousands of young hippie types, and their devotees were chanting big kirtan. We're all very young. We were all in our early 20s or teenagers. And we were chanting, devotees were chanting. And then Brahmananda brought Srila Prabhupada this carton of Krishna book, about 20 Krishna books. And he opened the carton. Prabhupada looked at them. He was very impressed, very beautiful. They were very large silver with Radha Krishna on the cover. And Prabhupada said, okay, you can come up and buy a book from me. And so people were just rushing Prabhupada to buy a book from his hands. Prabhupada was signing his name and taking $10, which is about 800 rupees, and taking $10 for each book. In this way, the Prabhupada was distributing the books. And he didn't even keep one for himself. He just distributed all the books. And it was very surprising that he wouldn't keep one for himself. So Prabhupada said that my book distribution is the most important activity for spreading the mission of Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada was, every night, he'd wake up at midnight, he would take rest from 10 p.m. till 12. Then he'd wake up at 12 and translate wherever he was. He would speak into a dictaphone and translate the Srimad Bhagavatam every single day and give purports based on his Krishna's dictation from within the heart, as well as referring to great acharyas like Sridhar Swami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and so on, commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam. So this was the beginning of Srila Prabhupada's great revolution, and it started in America. People all over the world, they like to read books. So Srila Prabhupada was writing these books and encouraging us, actually forcing us, you must distribute my books. He said the big books with the hardbound cover are most important because people will keep them in their library and they'll take it out, read it. He said the magazines they're important, but not as much because people, they read a magazine, they throw it on a table, they get thrown in the garbage or something. So in San Francisco, there was a devotee named Keshava. He was actually a military guy. He had gone to Vietnam, Special Commando, and he had joined the temple in Los Angeles. So he was a bit of a Kshatriya. And he was going out every day, door to door in San Francisco, and he would show this Krishna book. And he would show the introduction was by one of the Beatles. Beatles were world famous. They were more famous than, Jesus Christ, is what they said. We're more famous than Jesus. There was a huge, huge following of the Beatles, like millions and millions and millions of people. As he was going door to door, people were, were interested and they would buy the Krishna book. And Prabhupada was very, very encouraged, very, very encouraged. He said, now, when I come back to America, he was in India, I will visit your temple first. Whoever is distributing my big books, I will visit that temple first. So in this way, Prabhupada would visit San Francisco temple and inspire devotees to go out. At that time, like everywhere in the world, devotees were just leaving the temple during the day and after the morning program and going knocking on people's doors or going to shopping places where people purchase food and different things called shopping centers, shopping malls. People love shopping in the West, and these books were being distributed. So Prabhupada was gradually encouraging us and showing us that the most important part of his missionary activity, more important even than going and chanting in the streets, was the book distribution. And he quoted Bhaktisiddhanta as saying that this is the Brihat Madanga, that the books is a Brihat Madanga. People will read them and their lives will change. By 1971, 72, devotees, many young people, we were starting to join the movement in large numbers. At that time, of course, many swamis from India were coming, but most of them were impersonalists, or they were just straight out cheaters. They would not talk about God. They would talk about yoga, and they would say, "You're God, I'm God," all this kind of hodgepodge. But Srila Prabhupada was always giving the straight goods. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, and in the Gita he says that he is a person. Manmana Bhavabad Bhakto, Ajopi San Avyatma, all these verses that are there in the Bhagavad Gita. Avajanati Mamudha Manusham Tanum Ashritam Param Bhavam Ajananto. So Krishna's Bhagavad Gita became very popular, and Prabhupada went with his disciples to a very famous book publishing house in New York, Macmillan Publishing House, which was centered in England, but a large center in New York. This was a very international book publishing house. And they were looking to publish a Bhagavad Gita, a religious book from India. And here, Prabhupada's manuscript was complete. And by some luck, Brahmananda was walking in New York, and he met a person. He was perhaps chanting, I can't remember, but he met a person, and that person, executive manager for Macmillan. So Brahmananda went to Macmillan, and he showed the manuscript, Srila Prabhupada's manuscript of Bhagavad Gita. It was Krishna's arrangement. Suddenly Macmillan's company accepted Srila Prabhupada's manuscript, published thousands and thousands of Bhagavad Gitas. And Prabhupada said, oh, this is Krishna's arrangement to spread this movement. So devotees started distributing these Bhagavad Gitas. The first Bhagavad Gita was a little bit abridged. It was a soft cover, and we'd get $3 or $4 for it. But then Prabhupada had the complete Bhagavad Gita published in around 1972, and it was hardbound, very large, very beautiful. And Macmillan printed 20,000 of these Bhagavad Gitas, and they sold 15,000 to ISKCON. They supplied ISKCON, but they themselves were putting the Bhagavad Gitas all over the country of America, and in a few months they'd sold out all 20,000, and they had to republish again and again. People were just buying these Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. They found it completely compelling knowledge, very compelling, and they were just flying out of the door. So Macmillan was very, very happy that Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita was so very popular. And then the Christmas came in 1972. And what we had learned is that during the Christmas celebrations in America, the people just go crazy. They just go, so many people go to buy gifts. It's a whole frenzy. It's like a feeding frenzy of wild dogs. They go shopping for their relatives. They have to buy gifts because they'd feel guilty if they didn't. And so devotees started discovering that around the Christmas, what we call the Christmas marathon, thousands and thousands of books could be sold. It was a discovery in Los Angeles. A devotee named Ramaswar, who was in charge of the BBT at the time in America, the devotees went out in plain clothes, and they were distributing books, and it was midnight in Los Angeles, and still Ramaswar was distributing books, and he thought, oh, I better go back to the temple. Everyone's probably sleeping by now. When he went back to the temple, no one had returned. Everyone was still out in all the shopping areas, the shopping malls. Like you may have seen malls in Calcutta, they're very swank, very, very, fancy. So like that, devotees were going to these shopping malls. And they came back around 12:30, midnight, after midnight, and they were all glowing and ecstatic. And they were like, yes, so many books. So from December 22nd to December 24th, in those 3 days, devotees had distributed 17,000 books, and that was a record. And Ramaswamy sent a letter to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was like amazed. How could you distribute, one temple distribute so many books in 3 days? So this was the beginning of the huge wave of book distribution. Srila Prabhupada would visit all the different temples, and he would inspire everyone that now these books will change the entire face of the globe if you distribute these books. He said, people, even if they just touch my books, their lives will become changed. So you must take these books and put them in the homes of every single person in America. That was Prabhupada's order. And he was becoming very, very amazed by the sheer volume of books that were being distributed. So then Srila Prabhupada had a disciple in Germany called Hamsaduta. And Hamsaduta spoke German, although he was American. And he started translating the Bhagavad Gita in German language. And then Prabhupada sent his disciple Bhagawan to Europe, Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, France. And he started translating and publishing the book in these various European languages. And especially in Italy and France and Spain, these people are very cultured. And these books are like pieces of art. The printing technology in Italy is amazing. It's the center of Christianity at that, previously. And they were expert in printing beautiful, beautiful books with some gold filigree work on them. And these books look like pieces of art. So this whole book distribution just exploded in London, England. Srila Prabhupada had asked devotees there to start printing these books. And in this way, suddenly 72, 73, suddenly thousands and thousands of Prabhupada's books were being introduced into the various countries in all these various languages. And it became a huge volcanic explosion. Not to speak of Spanish books, the entire continent of South America with billions of people. Hridayananda Maharaj, one of Prabhupada's prominent disciples, he learned Spanish and he went to South America and started publishing books from Los Angeles and shipping them down to South America in Spanish. And so suddenly thousands and millions of books in South America were being distributed. This is in 73, 74. And Srila Prabhupada was just traveling all over the world and preaching and encouraging that the whole foundation of our movement are these books, Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So this whole Hare Krishna explosion took place in the beginning of the 70s, all the way through until, of course, still going. But in those days, with Srila Prabhupada's presence, it was just phenomenal how the enthusiasm, all the young people, and the leaders of countries, they couldn't help but take notice. And so they would invite Srila Prabhupada. If Prabhupada went to England, he would meet with leaders and aristocrats. If he went to America, many high-level professors and intellectuals would meet with him. When he went to Switzerland, he met with the Chancellor of Switzerland. In Paris, he met with the mayor in Paris. People were so amazed of what Srila Prabhupada had accomplished in such a short time. They wanted to meet him and ask him questions. Of course, they would be quite impacted that all these young people who were born in sinful environments and who had bad habits, where he was transforming them into pure Vaishnavas, and at such a young age as well. We were actually rejecting the material knowledge and the material way of life, and embracing Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada was predicted by Bhaktivinoda Thakur as a Senapati, as a great leader in general in the Sankirtan mission of Lord Chaitanya. As far as stories go about Srila Prabhupada, we as book distributors, we were told that if you want to associate with Srila Prabhupada, you simply go out and distribute his books. So we would only have opportunity to go on morning walks with Srila Prabhupada. And we were told that when you serve the spiritual master, he's present there. And the more books we distributed also, the more his words infiltrated into our consciousness. And the more we felt the presence of Srila Prabhupada. So I personally was with Srila Prabhupada only in the temple room when he gave classes or when he went for morning walks. And another thing that Srila Prabhupada really emphasized was destroying and crushing the scientists. Every day on morning walks, especially in Los Angeles, because Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, who was a PhD in chemistry, would come to visit Srila Prabhupada. He was from Manipur, and he was studying in University of California chemistry. So Srila Prabhupada would always ask him, so what are the scientists saying? And he said, Prabhupada, they say that life comes from chemicals. Life evolved from chemicals, and then we got life, simple life, and then slowly but surely, by mutation of genes and natural selection, I mean, nature doesn't select, it's just a machine. But they use this word quite wrongly, that you could get various species of life, the tree of Darwin. Prabhupada was smashing. He said, well, you have such advanced laboratories, why don't you take some chemicals and produce a living cell or a living creature? After all, your laboratories are more advanced than the early time of the universe, where you're saying under a rock or in some lake or some river, some or other chemicals came together by chance and produced life. So he called them fools and rascals. And he said, until you produce life, even in your laboratory, why are you telling us that life evolved from chemicals? So in this way, Srila Prabhupada was very strong in his preaching and very outspoken. And he would visit many universities. Of course, Prabhupada also organized what is called the library party, where devotees like Brahmananda's brother, Gargamuni, and some other devotees who I'm very friendly with, Abhinanda Prabhu, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, at the time his name was Ganesham. They would form these parties where they would go to various universities all over the world, actually, not just in the USA or in Europe, but they even went to other universities in different parts of the world, South America and so on. And they would meet these professors and they would take standing orders for these books. And it was very, very successful. In America, of course, many Indian professors were teaching on the campuses Hinduism. So they would always invite Srila Prabhupada to come. They were very intrigued to meet Srila Prabhupada. And so Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Prabhupada had ordered him that you use your education to repudiate and expose the cheating scientists of the world and the cheating intellectuals of the world. So he formed the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which was a collection of ISKCON, Vaishnava scientists who had degrees, and they would write and expose the various flaws of the atheistic theories. So Srila Prabhupada was invited many times by professors to these universities, and one professor of Hinduism invited Srila Prabhupada, I think it was in Chicago or Montreal, Canada. So Bhakti Swarup Damodar was with Srila Prabhupada, and this Hindu professor, he was speaking in the interview in his office with Srila Prabhupada. And then the professor said, "So Swamiji, what is Hinduism?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "You're a professor of Hinduism and you don't know what it is? What is that?" And the professor said, "Well, Swamiji, Hinduism is so vast. There's so many different philosophies. There's Karma Mimamsa. There is, Vedanta and Advaitism, and so many different types of philosophers, Nyaya philosophers. I don't really know what is Hinduism." So Prabhupada looked at Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. He said, "My dear disciple, if someone is teaching something that he doesn't know what it's about, what do you call a person like that?" And Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj said, "Prabhupada, that person is called a cheater, a cheater." And then Prabhupada looked at the professor in his face and said, "Yes, you're a cheater. You're just cheating people. You know nothing, but you're cheating people." And the professor he was almost in tears. Prabhupada was just chastising him. "You're just cheating. You're saying you're a professor of Hinduism, but you have no idea what it is." So in this way, Srila Prabhupada was very, very strong. When Prabhupada went to Paris also, custom in Paris is if a great or famous personality visits Paris, that's in France, then the mayor of Paris will meet him in this famous museums of Paris, very famous. And so Srila Prabhupada was invited to meet the mayor of Paris. And what happens is, when the mayor enters, everyone has to stand up and offer their respects as if he's a deity of Krishna. Like they offer namaskuru, namaskar. And so Prabhupada's disciples were there, and Prabhupada was sitting there, and the mayor walked in, and Prabhupada was supposed to stand up and offer his homage to the mayor. And the devotee Yogendra, he was a scholarly person studying in Paris. He's American. So Prabhupada, you have to get up. And Prabhupada said, "I have to get up for who? Who is it I have to stand up and offer obeisances to?" And he refused to stand up. And the mayor was standing there waiting. This is their culture, their custom. And Prabhupada was sitting there like this. And so then the mayor, he started speaking. And he was saying that France is famous for culture and intellectualism and spiritual knowledge. And he was glorifying his country, that we're so intellectual, we're so cultured, we have so much spiritual knowledge. And then they asked Prabhupada to speak. And Prabhupada said, he said, culture means Vedic culture. He said, culture means to know who you are, that you're the soul in the body, and God is also there. He's in your heart, and he's all pervading throughout the atoms and so on. He said, your culture is the culture of dogs and cats. All you do, and the mayor was standing there, and you could see his face just dropping, he's just looking so embarrassed. And Prabhupada was like, your culture is simply ahara nidra bhaya maitunya, simply the practice of dogs and cats. He said, you have no understanding of who you are. Therefore, you're nothing but an animal. Prabhupada is preaching like this to the mayor of Paris, one of the most famous cities on the planet. Most, they have it on such they exalt it to such an ascended place. Paris, famous. And they're nothing but dogs and cats, Prabhupada was saying to the mayor. And he's just standing there. Anyway, needless to say, the mayor was quite embarrassed, quite crestfallen, as you might say. And then Srila Prabhupada said, just distribute prasadam. And so the mayor and his entourage were just given prasadam. And then Srila Prabhupada did a tour of the museum. And on the ceiling of the museum are very famous paintings. And these paintings are of angelic women with no clothes on. So Prabhupada was sitting there with all his senior disciples around him. And he looked up at the ceiling and he said, the difference between you and me is that I can sit in a room full of naked women and nothing will happen. So he said, you must be very careful with these Western cultures because they're simply dogs and cats, simply trying to gratify their senses. Kamini, Kanyaka and Kamini. Kamini means beautiful woman and Kanya means gold. Money and women, that's all they care about, Prabhupada said. But he says, that is the difference between you and me. I cannot fall down. So Prabhupada was, of course, we could see when Srila Prabhupada came into the room to give class, to take darshan, we saw how he was glowing. And people would come, prominent people would come to see Prabhupada. And when they saw him, you could see that they were very taken aback by his beautiful glowing face, his beautiful presence. He had an aura about him. This is a very elevated personality, very powerful also. And when we could see that, the more we surrendered to Prabhupada, the more was revealed to us that he's a Shaktivesh avatar. He's not an ordinary human being. He's a great, great Mahajan, great Shaktivesh avatar. And he had this great power to transform the world and to establish an empire of Vaishnavas throughout the world. I have over 100 temples and millions of people and tens of thousands of followers from my preaching. He said, what is the comparison? He said, one who is empowered by Lord Chaitanya, Krishna Shakti Vinanahe Tara Pravartana. He can spread this bhakti cult throughout the entire world and change people from dukis to sukis. So like this, he was very strong because he said so many pseudo yogis and pseudo swamis are coming to America simply to make money. And many of them became multimillionaires, but they were simply cheating people. The Prabhupada said, I have come to give. I've come to give Krishna Prema. I've come to give the great treasure of love of God that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is trying to freely give to those who are unqualified. This was Srila Prabhupada's mood when we saw Srila Prabhupada. I mean, we were young guys. I was 20, just turned 21. And you saw Prabhupada. We had no idea what we were doing, really. We just wanted to please Prabhupada. We weren't very mature. If you're 21 years old, what do you know? Some Prabhupada's disciples were 16, 17, 18 years old. When Srila Prabhupada met Brahmananda and Gargamuni, they were two of his first disciples in New York. They came to the 26 2nd Avenue small drop-in center in the slums of New York. And they eventually, after a few months, they asked Swamiji, how can we become your disciples? And Prabhupada said, well, you have to accept me as good as God. Chakshadari Tvenasamasu Sastri Yuktashtata Bhavyate Vishadbi. And they were shocked because Prabhupada was saying, you're not God, you're simply Mamai Mamso Jiva Loke. You're simply Vibhinamsa, you're part and parcel of Krishna. Two boys, Brahmananda and his brother Gargamuni, they took initiation, and Prabhupada said, bring your mother to the initiation. So in 26 Second Avenue, a small little place, they got initiation, and their mother was there. So after initiation and getting their spiritual names and taking their vows, Srila Prabhupada said, go to your mother and offer your obeisances to her. And so they went to their mother and offered their obeisances to her. And Srila Prabhupada told their mother, don't think that they're not doing you the greatest service in the world. They're doing the greatest service to you in the world by becoming devotees and spreading the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So then Prabhupada said to their mother, he said, it is custom for our relatives to give some dakshin, some bakshish, some donation to the guru. Would you like to give? And she was sitting there. She was dreaming how her two sons would become engineers and doctors or something. And she wasn't very happy about it. And she said, what more do you want, Swamiji? I've given my both sons to you. She said, isn't that enough? And Prabhupada smiled. He said, okay, Hare Krishna. Like this is some of the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. There was one disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Her name was Yamuna. Now, Yamuna wasn't really a hippie, but she was always searching. And she was living on the west coast of America in Oregon. That's where I got initiated. Anyway, she had heard that Mukunda, or Michael Grant, and his girlfriend, Yamuna's sister Janaki, had joined the Swami, and that they were to get married. This was in 66, 67. And so she was invited to come to New York, travel to New York to participate as a relative of Janaki. As is the custom in the Vedic culture, the relatives or the parents, they give the daughter to the groom's family. This is the custom. So Prabhupada was trying to create this. When Yamuna came, she had a background in health food. She was on a special diet of macrobiotics, no sugar, no white flour, very healthy diet. And so Yamuna became very attached to Srila Prabhupada. Her name was Joan. And Prabhupada brought her in and he said, do you know how to make chapatis? And he had to show her how to make chapatis for the wedding. Prabhupada had a jar of gulab jamuns that he had made. And anyone that came to the 26 Second Avenue temple, the first temple ever established, Prabhupada would give those young people a nice gulab jamun. And it was just soaking in sugar water, as we know. It's just soaking in this sugar water. So when Joan came to see Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada took one of these out of the jar. He said, okay, you take this. This is Krishna Prasad. And he was offering it to her. And she's going, oh, no, Swamiji. I'm on a macrobiotic diet. No, I don't take, no, too much sugar. I don't take sugar. I'm like, eat. And he forced her to take this gulab jamun. She put it in her mouth and it just exploded like fireworks in her mouth. And she was on such a strict diet that she thought, this is nothing but sugar. Sugar with water and some flour. And she thought, oh, I'm not going to come back here. She took a vow, oh, I can't come back. He's going to give me more. Somehow or other, though, she was so attracted to Srila Prabhupada, guide her, supervise her in the kitchen, cooking for the marriage and how to cook. And then Yamuna would ask Prabhupada, Swamiji, can I take a break? I need to go drink some water. I need to go out, step outside, drink some water. And then Prabhupada would sit her down and say, when we're cooking for Krishna, we don't, we maintain a very strict standard. We don't stop to drink water. We have to wash our hands, wash our mouth. We be so clean when we cooking for Krishna in Radharani's kitchen. So in this way, Prabhupada was training up Yamuna Devi what the standard of cooking for Krishna was like, and how you have to keep your mind on serving, creating this preparation for Krishna. So in this way, this is how the movement started. Prabhupada told Yamuna and Guru Das, her husband, to be, and Michael Grant, Mukunda Maharaj now, Mukunda, and Janaki, the sister of Yamuna, to go to England and open centers. It was very, very difficult. Very difficult. There was no place for them to stay. They were all living in different parts of London, and they were trying to meet the Beatles. So this is a great breakthrough, because the Beatles were so famous that all the young people all over the Western world were following the Beatles. They were the acharyas for the young, radical, rebellious young people. So every day Yamuna would cook a pie made of apples and send it to the Apple Studio. The name of the Beatles studio, musical studio, was called Apple Studios. So one day Yamuna forgot to, or somehow failed to, make this pie. And the Beatles, they were just accepting, oh, this wonderful pie. It was prasadam, of course. And they were eating every day. I mean, you can imagine, these were very, very famous people, 4 guys, 4 musicians. So they sent a message to the devotees, where's our pie today? And then the devotees said, well, we can make a pie for you, but we want to deliver it ourselves. We want to meet you. So somehow or other, this is how they met the Beatles. And when George Harrison, he looked out of his office door, and there was a large area where people were sitting to meet the Beatles, all kinds of people from all around the world. He saw Shyamasundar with a shaved head and dhoti, and he just walked straight to Shyamasundar, and he said, I've been looking for you, Hare Krishnas, for ages. He said, I've been, chanting Hare Krishna. I've been listening to your record, because they had made a record, Hare Krishna a record. And they made friends with each other. And George Harrison started helping them get a temple in London, England, very, very famous city, very popular, very important city on the planet, London. It still is. And so in this way, George Harrison helped devotees establish footing in London, England. And Prabhupada was so very, very happy, because his godbrothers had gone to England, sent there by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, but they hadn't been successful in the least. They hadn't made any penetration into the society of England. But here now, his disciples, who were householders, not even sannyasis, had been able to penetrate and establish a temple in England. So Prabhupada was very proud when Hari Sori was giving Prabhupada massage in England. Prabhupada was speaking to some Indian gentleman living there. And he said, just see, all the English, they took over India for 200 years. They ruled India. But here I have an Englishman, and he's massaging my feet. He was saying, who has done this? How many Indians could say this, like this? Prabhupada was speaking like this. I have an Englishman massaging my feet. So he was very, very um, impressed by the preaching of Yamuna and the devotees in England, Mukunda Maharaj, and so on. And, they would go out on the Harinam Sankirtan every day. They would distribute a few Bhakti Godheads, and this way they developed the Krishna conscious movement in England. And then Prabhupada said, go to other countries. So they went to Germany and France. And the Krishna consciousness movement started spreading in Western Europe at that time. Prabhupada always spoke about Russia. And he said that we want to print books in Russian and distribute them in Russian. So Srila Prabhupada, of course, in 1971, I believe, he got a visa to Russia for 5 days. And it was under the grip of the communist regime at that time. It was very strict. It was a dictatorship, totalitarian, very, very suppressive kind of government. And Prabhupada went there with Shyamasundar, who was American. And Shyamasundar was walking around, shaved head, dhoti in Moscow. And some young teenagers, they said, oh, who are you? Where are you from? And he said, I'm from America. And these boys, Anatoly was his name, said, do you have any Beatles records? I love the Beatles. Everyone loved the Beatles. So they were all songs about peace and love, you know. So Shyamasundar said, no, I don't, but I have a guru here from India, and he's teaching, you know, the ancient philosophy, the ancient culture of India. So why don't you come and meet him? So those two boys, they came and met Srila Prabhupada in Moscow within the space of 5 days. And Srila Prabhupada spoke to them, and one boy, he became the first Russian disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And he started preaching in Russia under, you know, in a incognito way, because you weren't allowed to publicly preach religion at the time. Communism, they kind of keep religion. They don't accept religion so much. The philosophy of communism rejects God. So this is how the revolution took place in Russia. And now we see how huge the Russian yatra is, how many people have become devotees. So Srila Prabhupada used to stand in his hotel in Moscow, and outside he would see all these parades of military equipment and military rockets with bombs and so on going past. They were doing a great show of their military power. And Prabhupada would look, and he'd say, these people, they don't even have vegetables to eat over here. They're so suppressed. He said it won't last. He said in 5 years, in a few years, this whole communist regime will fail. It will crumble. And his prediction came true. By 1990, the USSR, the Soviet Union, completely crumbled and disintegrated because it was based, fear-based government, fear-based regime. So Prabhupada predicted that also. So he would ask Shyamasundar, so where should we go next? And Shyamasundar said, let's go to Africa. So then Prabhupada would go to Africa and preach to the Africans. And of course, Africans are considered tribal people, less civilized people. But Srila Prabhupada said, just see the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, that they went, and Brahmananda was ordered by Prabhupada to distribute Krishna consciousness all over Africa. And of course, it's a little fearful because in Africa, Brahmananda said, you just see a man walking by with a wild animal on his shoulder that he just killed. And they would hunt with spears, you know, and kill wild animals. So it was a little fearful. But the preaching was very successful. And now in Africa, we have so many devotees, so many temples, such a great spread of Krishna consciousness all over Africa. So Srila Prabhupada, he wasn't so concerned just going to the the famous cities in the world, but he was also interested in going to the more remote regions of the world, like Africa and even in South America. So much jungle there, but he would go there and preach in Mexico, Venezuela, and different parts of South America, and people would take to Krishna consciousness. So this is the great and wonderful days with Srila Prabhupada in the West, establishing Krishna consciousness. Then, of course, he came back to India with his white elephants. He brought his devotees, Yamuna and others, to Malati, to India, and he wanted to establish on the subcontinent of India Krishna consciousness. So Sarabi Swami was engaged by Prabhupada in designing the beautiful temple of Mumbai and Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan. This was all part of Srila Prabhupada's strategy to create a great following of Krishna conscious devotees in India, which is the womb of Vedic culture. It's the center of Vedic culture. So Prabhupada brought his white elephants, his American disciples, to India, and people were so impressed. How these Westerners were trying to go to America, and here they are in India, renouncing these false, foolish values, materialistic values of their parents and their grandparents, and becoming Vaishnavas, becoming devotees. So, of course, a huge impact was made in Gujarat, in Mumbai, in Delhi, and of course, many of the dignitaries of India wanted to meet Prabhupada and see how he had accomplished this great miracle. Remember that when Prabhupada was trying to form a society of Vaishnavas in India, he met with not much interest. Lal Bahadur Shastri, the Prime Minister, got a set of Bhagavatams that Prabhupada translated, but wasn't much interest. But once Prabhupada went to America, created a movement of Vaishnavas, then of course, let us take a look at what Swamiji Prabhupada has to say. Everyone is following the West. Everyone's following the American dream, which is more of a nightmare. But America is the leading country, and Prabhupada said, if you Americans become Krishna conscious, then the whole world will follow you. That is the way it is. And he said that. So we see how people, when they saw the Americans becoming Krishna conscious, the people of India decided to get serious about it and take it seriously. And so now, the first time I came to India was in 1977 to see Srila Prabhupada because he was very ill. And at that time, I don't know, maybe 10 temples in India, New Delhi, maybe one in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai, Mumbai, some cities like that, Mumbai, Calcutta, Delhi. Most of the devotees in India at that time, 77, were just Western devotees, Canadians, Americans, Australians, English, like that. A couple of Italians. And we were trying to organize and spread the movement. And now, well over 100 temples all over India. The Krishna conscious movement is spreading like wildfire in West Bengal, especially, but all over India, the Krishna conscious movement is spreading quite vigorously. And Srila Prabhupada would be very proud and very happy about that.